The Chronicles of Narnia, The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis. Chapter 8 The House of Harfang. Go on, Paul, do your stuff, whispered Scrub. Joel found that her mouth was so dry that she couldn't speak a word. She nodded savagely at Scrub. Thinking to himself that he would never forgive her, or Puddlegum either, Scrub licked his lips and shouted up to King Giant. If you please, sire, the Lady of the Green Kirtle salutes you by us instead that you'd like to have us for your autumn feast. The giant king and queen looked at each other, nodded to each other, and smiled in a way that Jill didn't exactly like. She liked the king better than the queen. He had a fine curled beard and a straight eagle-like nose, and was really rather good-looking as giants go. The queen was dreadfully fat, and had a double chin and a fat powdered face, which wasn't a very nice thing at the best of times, and of course looks much worse when it's 10 times too big. Then the king put out his tongue and licked his lips. Anyone might do that, but his tongue was so very large and red, and it came out so unexpectedly that it gave Joel quite a shock. "Oh, what good children!" said the queen. "Perhaps she's the nice one after all," thought Joel. "Yes, indeed," said the king. "Quite excellent children. We welcome you to our court. Give me your hands." He stretched down his great right hand, very clean and with a many number of rings on the fingers, but also with terrible pointed nails. He was much too big to shake hands with the children, in turn held up to him, but he shook their arms. "And what's that?" asked the king, pointing to Puddlegum. "Respectable," said Puddlegum. "Oh!" screamed the queen, gathering her skirts close about her ankles. "The horrid thing! It's alive!" "He's quite all right, your majesty, he really is," said Scrub harshly. "You'll like him much better when you get to know him. I'm sure you will. I hope you all won't lose interest in Joel for the rest of the book if I tell you that at this moment she began to cry. There was a good deal of excuse for her. Her feet, her hands and ears and nose were still only just beginning to thaw. Melted snow was trickling off her clothes, and she had hardly anything to eat or drink that day. Her legs were aching so that she could not go on standing much longer. Anyway, it did more good at the moment than anything else would have done, for the queen said, "Ah, the poor child! My lord, we do nothing to keep our guests standing. Quick, some of you, take them away. Give them food and wine and baths. Comfort the little girl. Give her lollipops, give her dolls, give her physics, give her all you can think of. Possets and comforts and caraways and lullabies and toys. Don't cry, little girl, or won't be good for anything when the feast comes." Joel was just as indignant as you and I would have been at the mention of toys and dolls, and though lollipops and comforts might be all very well in their way, she was very much hoped that something more solid would be provided. The queen's foolish speech, however, produced excellent results, for Puddlegum and Scrub were at once picked up by a gigantic gentleman-in-waiting, and Joel by a gigantic maid of honour, and carried off to their rooms. Joel's room was about the size of a church, and would have been rather grim if it had not a roaring fire on the earth, and a very thick crimson carpet on the floor. And there were delightful things began to happen to her. She was handed over to the queen's old nurse, who was, from the giant's point of view, a very little old woman, almost bent double with age, and from the human point of view, a giant small enough to go about an ordinary room without knocking her head on the ceiling. She was very capable, though Joel did not wish she wouldn't keep on clicking her tongue and saying things like, "Oh la la, up's a daisy," and "There's a duck," and "Now we'll be all right, my poppet." She filled a giant foot bath with hot water and helped Joel into it. If you can swim, as Jill could, a giant bath is a lovely thing, and giant towels, though a bit rough and coarse, are lovely too, because there are acres of them. In fact, you don't need to dry at all, you just roll about on them in front of the fire and enjoy yourself. And when that was over, clean, fresh, warm clothes were put on Jill. Very splendid clothes and a little too big for her, but clearly made for humans, not giantesses. "I suppose that if that woman in the little green kirtle comes here, they must be used to guests of our size," thought Jill. She soon saw that she was right about this, for a table and chair of the right height for an ordinary grown-up human were placed for her, and the knives and forks and spoons were proper size too. It was delightful to sit down, feeling warm and clean at last. Her feet were still bare, and it was lovely to tread on the giant carpet. She sank in it well over her ankles, and it was just the thing for sore feet. The meal, which I suppose we must just call dinner, though it was nearer tea time, was a cock-a-legal soup, and a hot roast turkey, and a steamed pudding, and roast chestnuts, and as much fruit as you could eat. The only annoying thing was that the nurse kept on coming in and out. Anytime she came in, she brought a gigantic toy with her, a huge doll, bigger than Jill herself, a wooden horse on wheels about the size of an elephant, a drum that looked like a young gasometer, and a woolly lamb. They were crude, badly made things, painted in very bright colors, and Jill hated the sight of them. She kept on telling the nurse she didn't want them, but the nurse said, "Tut, tut, tut, tut. You want 'em all right when you had a bit of a rest. Now, tee-hee-hee, Betty, bye now, a precious poppet." The bed was not a giant bed, but only for a big four-poster, like what you might see in an old-fashioned hotel, and it looked very small. It looked in that enormous room. She was very glad to tumble into it. "Is it still snowing, nurse?" she asked sleepily. "No, raining now, ducky," said the giantess. "Rain will wash away all the nasty snow. Precious Poppet will be able to go out and play tomorrow." And she tucked Jill in and said good night. I know nothing is so disagreeable as being kissed by a giantess. Jill thought the same, but was asleep in 5 minutes. The rain fell steadily all evening and all the night, dashing against the windows of the castle, and Jill never heard it, but slept deeply, past supper time and past midnight, and then came the deadest hour of the night, and nothing stirred but mice in the house of giants. At that hour there came to Jill a dream. It seemed to her that she awoke in the same room and saw the fire, sunk low and red, and the firelight in the great wooden horse. And the horse came of its own will, rolling on its wheels across the carpet, and stood at her head. Now it was no longer a horse, but a lion as big as the horse. And then it was not a lion, but a toy lion, but a real lion. The real lion, just as she had seen him on the mountain beyond the world's end. And the smell of sweet-smelling things were all filled the room. But there was some trouble in Jill's mind, though she could not think of what it was, and the tears streamed down her face and wet the pillow. The lion told her to repeat all the signs, and she found that she had forgotten them all. At that, a great horror came over her, and Aslan took her up in his jaws. She could feel his lips and his breath, but not his teeth, and carried her to the window and made her look out. The moon shone bright, and written in great letters across the world or sky, she did not know which, were the words, "Under me." After that, the dream faded away, and she awoke very late the next morning. She did not remember that she dreamed at all. She was up and dressed and had finished breakfast in front of the fire when the nurse opened the door and said, "Here's Pretty Poppet's little friends come to play with her." In came Scrub and the Marsh Wiggle. "Hello, good morning," said Jill. "Isn't this fun? I slept about 15 hours, I do believe. I do feel better, don't you?" "I do," said Scrub, "but Puddlegum always says he has a headache. Hello, your window has a window seat. If we got up on that, we could see out." And at once they all did so, and at the first glance Jill said, "Oh, how perfectly dreadful!" The sun was shining, and, except for a few drifts, the snow had been almost completely washed away by the rain. Down below them, spread out like a map, lay the flat hilltop which they had struggled over yesterday afternoon. Seen from the castle, it could not be mistaken for anything but the ruins of a gigantic city. It had been flat, as Jill now saw, because it was still, on the whole, paved, though in places the pavement was broken. The criss-cross banks were what was left of the walls of the huge buildings which might once have been giants' palaces and temples. One bit of wall, about 500 feet high, was still standing. It was that which she had thought was a cliff. The things that had looked like factory chimneys were enormous pillars, broken off at unequal heights. Their fragments lay at their bases like felled trees of monstrous stone. The ledges which they had climbed down to the north side of the hill, and also, no doubt, the other ledges which they had climbed up on the south side, were the remaining steps of giant stairs. To crown all, in large, dark letters across the centre of the pavement, ran the words, "Under me." The three travellers looked at each other in dismay, and after a short while Scrub had said what they were all thinking. The second and third signs muffed, and at that moment Jill's dream rushed back into her mind. "It's my fault," she said in despairing tones. I'd given up repeating that signs every night. If I'd been thinking about them, I would have seen it was the city, even in all that snow." "I'm worse," said Puddlegum. "I did see, or nearly. I thought it looked I thought it looked uncommonly like a ruined city." "You're the only one who isn't to blame," said Scrub. "You did try to make us stop." "Didn't try hard enough, though," said the Marsh Wiggle. "And I'd no call to be trying. I ought to have done it, as I couldn't have stopped you two with one hand each." The truth is, said Scrub, we were so jolly keen on getting to this place that we weren't bothering about anything else. At least I know I was. Ever since we met that woman with the knight who didn't talk, we've been thinking of nothing else. We'd nearly forgotten about the Prince Rillian. I shouldn't wonder, said Puddlegum, if that wasn't exactly what she intended. What I don't quite understand, said Joel, is how we didn't see the lettering. Or could it have come there since last night? Could he, Aslan, have put it there all night? It was such a queer dream. And she told him all about it. Why, you chump, said Scrub, we did see it. We got into the lettering, don't you see? We got into the letter E in me. That was your sunk lane. We walked along the bottom stroke of the E, due north, turned to our right along the upright, came to another turn into the right, that's the middle stroke, and went on to the top left-hand corner, or if you like, the north and eastern corner of the letter, and came back, like the bully idiots we are. He kicked the window seat savagely and went on. So it's no good, Paul. I know that you were thinking because I was thinking the same. You were thinking how nice it would have been if Aslan didn't put the instructions on the stones of the ruined city till after we'd passed it, and then it should have been his fault, not ours. So likely, isn't it? No, we must just own up. We've only 4 signs to go by, and we've muffed the first 3. You mean I have, said Joel. It's quite true. I've spoiled everything ever since you brought me here. All the same, I'm frightfully sorry, and all that. All the same, what are the instructions? Under me doesn't seem to make much sense. Yes, it does, though, said Puddlegum. It means we've got to look for the prince under that city. But how can we? Asked Joel. That's the question, said Puddlegum, rubbing his big frog-like hands together. How can we now? No doubt, if we had our minds on the job when we are at the ruinous city, we'd have been shown now. Found a little door, cave, or a tunnel, met someone who would help us. Might have been, you never know, Aslan himself. We'd have got down under those paving stones somehow or another. Aslan's instructions always work. There are no expectations. But how do we do it now? That's another matter. Well, we shall just have to go back, I suppose, said Joel. Easy, isn't it? Said Puddlegum. We might try opening that door to begin with. And they all looked at the door and saw that none of them could reach the handle, and it was almost certainly no one could turn it if they did.